Again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to offer a warm welcome to everyone joining our webinar today. We are stronger together, a conversation with Heather Mizeur. And thank you, especially to our co-sponsors. We are One Alliance, the National Association of Hispanic Nurses, PCNA, and ACHNE. Today, I'd like to give a warm welcome to our two speakers, Heather Mizeur, as well as Dr. Katie Huffling. But to start, we gather here today because many of us have been struggling with the division, negativity, and disconnection in public discourse. As nurses, we understand the transformative power of human connection and the value of meaningful conversations. So, with that, today we are thrilled to welcome Heather Mizeur, a former Maryland state legislator and gubernatorial, candidate for governor, to join us for a discussion on her efforts to bridge these divides through her initiative, We Are One Alliance. Heather is a former Maryland state legislator, congressional senior staffer, and nationally recognized advocate for healing political division and restoring civic grace. With more than 2 decades of experience in public service, she has been at the forefront of shaping health, environmental, civil rights, and economic justice policy, both in the halls of Congress and on the ground in her community. She began her public service career as a legislative and policy analyst for 3 members of the U.S. House of Representatives before joining U.S. Senator John Kerry as his domestic policy director. In that role, she led his health and human services portfolio before, during, and after his 2004 presidential campaign, also serving as the Kerry Edwards Maryland campaign manager. Frustrated by the gridlock in Washington, Heather turned her focus to state government, where she believed real change could happen. And in 2006, she was elected to the Maryland General Assembly, where she served for 8 years and built a strong reputation as a bipartisan consensus builder. Her legislative victories include expanding health coverage, leading the environmental charge to ban fracking in Maryland, advancing marriage equality, and championing fair wages, small businesses, and tax reform. Twice, she felt called to bring her unique voice into campaigns widely seen as unwinnable, but critical for shaping shifts in consciousness. In her 2014 bid for governor of Maryland and her 2022 run for Congress, Heather led inspiring people-powered efforts that transcended partisanship and invited voters into politics of integrity, compassion, and common ground solutions. And finally, in 2017, she founded the We Are One Alliance, a nonprofit organization with a mission to restore faith in the heart of humanity, help people disrupt division, reconnect to their values, reimagine democracy, and live more authentic, connected lives. Joining Heather in today's conversation is our very own Dr. Katie Huffling, a certified nurse midwife and executive director of the Alliance of Nurses for Healthy Environments, the leading global nursing organization focused on the intersection of human and planetary health. With Annie, Dr. Huffling works with nurses and nursing organizations to elevate environmental health issues, such as climate change, toxic chemicals, and sustainability in healthcare amongst the nursing profession. Dr. Huffling is a passionate supporter of nurse-led advocacy in support of healthier environments for all. Welcome. Thank you both.
Thank you so much, Millie. Let me get these moving here. There we go. So before we get started, and Heather, does her opening remarks, I just wanted to tell all of you how Heather and I first met. As many of you might know, Annie was very active in the anti-fracking movement in Maryland, and Heather was one of the major champions that really made it possible for fracking to be banned in the state of Maryland. And so she and I first met at a um, press conference in Baltimore. And I remember her introducing herself. And when I told her I was a midwife, she was so excited that a midwife was being a part of this anti-fracking movement. And she told me, she's like, my wife and I, we aren't having kids, but if we were, we'd go to a midwife. We totally get what midwives do. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna like you. I know this. And we've worked together over the years on other, I think, really inspiring campaigns. And um, I'm just thrilled that she can be here with us today. I think all of us in this turbulent world right now can use some guidance on how to bring civil discourse back into our advocacy realm and how to, I think, keep the joy flowing, as we're navigating these kind of challenging waters. And so I'll turn it over to you, Heather. But folks, if you're having any questions, please pop them in the chat. We'll have lots of time for discussion.
Oh, hi, Katie. Thank you so much. I remember that press conference well. We had a jug of brown fracked water there for the cameras, asking everyone, would you drink this? Why do we want to bring fracking to Maryland? And we crawl, you sometimes on policy issues, you crawl and then you walk and then you run. We were focused initially on getting a moratorium in place so that we could study it and prove what we believe to be a need to ban that activity in our state. And eventually we were able to do that. And it was incredible being on the front lines with you from the very beginning on that important initiative in our state. And yes, we are gathering at such a very unique and interesting time in our country right now. Just take a deep breath, everyone. I promise you we're going to be okay. I am someone who has always loved my country very, very much a nerdy political science kid. I think my sister might be on this call. She's a nurse in Illinois and 5 years my junior, and can attest to the fact that every day when I woke up, I had an American flag in my bedroom, and I would stand before it and not just pledge allegiance. I would state the American Creed, which I want to share with you today if you haven't heard it, because I think it's an important reminder of what it is we're all still holding on to as the fabric of who we aspire to be in this country. And this was written after World War I to bring the country together under a sense of who we are. I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed, a democracy in a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states, a perfect union, one inseparable, established upon the principles of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity, for which American patriots sacrificed their lives and fortunes. I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to respect its flag, to obey its laws, to protect its constitution, and to defend it against all enemies. Now, of course, we haven't always been a perfect union. I think maybe we never have been. It's something we've always aspired to be. But in these times right now, I know many of us are clutching white-knuckled about what could possibly be next that we're having to deal with. And I go back to this notion of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity, because it's really the humanity piece that we're calling forth right now. In a democracy, it is not just a a form of governance. It is, to me, not something to be reclaimed. We only can lose it if we lose connection to each other. Democracy is restoring a connection. It's a daily faith in each other. It's how we communicate with each other and how we show up in the civic space. And that's why when I founded the We Are One Alliance, and one of our programs is called Soul Force Politics, that work is specifically focused on how is it that we can transcend partisanship, rise above the division, um, allow for grace in the gaps between us to understand each other better and come back to a place where we're solving common problems in our communities again. Now, I know, well, you have done such amazing work at the federal level on a whole host of health and environmental issues. And in the current dynamic where not a lot is happening at the federal level, not just because the government's closed, um, but you have shifted a lot of your efforts at getting some really great initiatives passed in state legislatures right now as well. And I congratulate you on that and encourage you to keep up those efforts. And I thought today, one place we could start the dialogue is that I recently dusted off a book that if you haven't read, I highly encourage you to read. It's called The Four Agreements. The author's name is Don Miguel Ruiz. And they're four simple agreements to live by. But I'm going to overlay those agreements with some stories today from my experience in the state legislature to kind of drive home how and why these agreements, when we are applying them to the civic space, can create an opportunity for shifts in our relationships with each other or in the relationships you're looking to build with legislators, or even just how to have a better Thanksgiving meal with a crazy aunt or uncle that you're a little bit nervous about in a few weeks. So the first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. Words have deep meaning. They're like spells that we cast on each other. Do we stop to pay attention to the words that we are speaking? Not just outside of ourselves, but even the words that are in our own minds. Sometimes we have a pretty negative voice that can speak to our own self. That's not being impeccable with our word either. By bringing attention to what we say and how we say it, we build a deeper trust with ourselves and with other people. When we are impeccable with our word, amazing things can unfold in our lives. I have one story to share from the legislature. It's about a relationship I built with a Republican colleague who couldn't have been any different than me on every level. Chair of the Tea Party caucus, chair of the pro-life caucus. I am a pro-choice progressive Democrat. And he is somebody who I built a really lasting friendship with, in part because I don't fit in any one box. I also went to the prayer breakfast and I'm deeply spiritual and I'm always looking for ways to connect. And in that connection with this legislator, after we built friendship over time, I went to him one day to suggest that we work on a bill to lower the abortion rate, to improve infant mortality rates for children, and to save the state money. And he said, okay, Mizeur, what's the catch? I'm not sure how you and I are going to work together on these things. And I said, it's a family planning expansion bill, but it's not something we have to fight over. When we empower women with family planning services, they have wanted pregnancies and the abortion rate naturally goes down. Here, I have some data from the Alan Guttmacher Institute that suggests how many abortions in Maryland would lower as a result of increasing family planning services for low-income women. And when we enroll women in healthcare services, they get prenatal care and they have healthier pregnancies and their babies are born better. And we're going to be able to get a toehold on this persistent challenge we have with infant mortality rates in our state. And guess what? There's a bonus. The federal government wants to give us an enhanced matching rate. So our Medicaid reimbursement from the state will increase to a 90% federal matching rate. It makes fiscal sense for us. agreed to do this bill with me, and we got it passed. I will also say that at the same time that we passed the legislation, the federal government at that time was experiencing or threatening another one of these federal government shutdowns over the issue of whether or not to fund family planning. And he and I penned an op-ed piece in the Washington Post highlighting why this doesn't need to be a partisan issue. And you might think, well, okay, in this current environment, that's never possible. It is. It absolutely is. Because even when Mike and I decided to work on this together, it was during a time where already suspicion was high between the two sides on sources of data and information. Typically, you go and take something like data from the Alan Guttmacher Institute to someone who's on the other side of an issue, they're going to not trust your source of information. But the reason why he did is he said, Heather, I trust you. I trust you. You've always been a woman of your word with me. Now, a deeper place of understanding in this story is that we also were simultaneously working to get marriage equality passed in Maryland. And as an openly gay legislator, I was one leading the charge, one among others. And the while that debate was going on, Mike, who served on the Judiciary Committee and often was grilling people with his anti-marriage equality positions, was quietly at night calling me and asking me for advice on how to be a better dad to his daughter who had just come out to him. And I kept that secret, and I never at all challenged him about being in a place of hypocrisy. We have to have compassion where people are on their journey. And I understood that where he was publicly was very different than where he was feeling privately in relationship to his family. And who doesn't want to encourage someone to be a good dad to his daughter? We deepened our friendship because I gave him space and grace to have those beliefs, and because I was always impeccable with my word with him. The only reason why I feel comfortable telling you that story now is that it is public. His daughter is very publicly out, and he is now passed, and his family is comfortable with me sharing that story now. The second agreement is to not take things personally. That can be a hard one sometimes, right? When we're feeling attacked, when we feel like our values are being threatened. I'm going to give a lot of examples from the marriage equality effort because I think that for me, these are the best examples from my own personal experience of how we can transcend something that can feel very personal, that can be very tough to overcome. I had a lot more emotional issues that I had to overcome dealing with the marriage equality debate with my colleagues than almost any other issue because it impacted me more personally. So, on taking things personally, though, I'm going to go back to college on when I very first was coming out. Prior to coming out, my engagement on college campus was no different than how I wanted it to continue, but it caught some people by surprise. I was and still am a Catholic woman. I believe in working for change within institutions, and I was a teacher of the Catholic RCIA program, Catholic confirmation on campus. I was a lector and a minister, and one of the priests at the church there was a very, very, very dear friend of mine. We prayed the rosary regularly. We would have dinner together. I went to daily mass. And when I came out, he completely cut me off. His response was, I am not okay with this. I never have been okay with this. I've always told God, keep gay and lesbians away from me. And I can't even believe that my best friend is telling me that she's gay. And he just cut off all communication. Well, my response was to not take it personally, to understand that he was in a process. I mean, I was in my own process. I had to come to comfort with this. I spent time praying the gay away. because we live in a culture that for many years, at least when I was growing up, it wasn't okay. So how could I not have compassion for him on where he is in his journey when I had to go through some of that myself? And so I wrote him letters sharing that I loved him unconditionally. I would still go to mass and even wink at him when I would take communion to let him know, hey, we're still friends. This is okay. I'm still the same person you've always loved. I'm not going to deny that it wasn't really hard and that I hadn't didn't shed some tears and have some sleepless nights and some nausea at times over the whole deal. Um, but I had to keep reminding myself not to take it personally. Ultimately, this wasn't about me. This was about him and how he had to reconcile his own beliefs with his faith. Well, it wasn't but a few weeks later that he called me into his office at the campus ministry, and he got on his knees and he begged me for forgiveness, and he was crying, and he said that he realized through this that he didn't want to lose his friend, and that he thought this was going to make him a better priest because he also realized, like, duh, what priests should ever say, oh, but not those people. The whole calling in and of itself is about loving everyone. So look, there's so much power in not taking things personally. The third agreement is to not make assumptions. This one is also really hard, especially when someone's standing across from you who looks differently. I have had um, people show up in when I was running for Congress in 2022 in a very conservative district. I had someone show up in a Trump 2024 hat at one of my meet and greets. At that time, it seemed laughable, like, oh, he'll never run again. But I know some people at the meet and greet thought, uh-oh, this was during the primary before I started doing my Republicans events and Heather in the hot seat. I'd literally go into Republican homes, sit in a chair and say, ask me any question you want to create this connection. But when Ralph walked in with this hat on, there was a lot of tension in the meeting space. And even more so when he expressed a discomfort with me being gay and feeling that my just being open about it was somehow throwing it in people's faces. And I was able to hold Ralph in much the same way that I held Father Brito in having a dialogue about how there's no room for shame, there's no room for judgment. I totally respect you and where you are in this. And let's talk instead, as a veteran, what I believe about providing you good healthcare coverage. And we started talking about another topic. By the end of this meeting, he was taking Republican for Mizeur signs and yard signs. And he sent me a photo of the yard sign next to his Trump 2024 sign, which already existed in his yard. And, we had a lot of that in the campaign, in a large part because I didn't make an assumption about what someone's motivations were, what non-judgment related to their belief system. It didn't mean that I changed what I believed in. I can hold on to my own values without shifting because I want to try to please someone or connect to them. But I cannot jump to assumptions that are meant to divide us. And the final agreement is an agreement that is about always doing your best. And really, this agreement is about putting all the other agreements into action. And it's important for us to remember that when we're doing our best, that's going to change from time to time. If we're not eating well and not getting a lot of sleep and we're exhausted or something's going wrong at work, we might have a shorter fuse and be less competent at living up to some of the agreements as we wish we were. But we just start over again, acknowledge we're always doing our best, and and do what we can to stay in alignment with our integrity, without uh, taking things personally, without making assumptions. Um, when we put those into action by doing our best, really amazing things can happen. And this will be the final story I share before we open it up to Q&A. When I when we were working on the marriage equality law, I got a notification that legislators were proposing creating a marriage caucus. And I kind of knew in the underlying, I don't think this was an assumption, that it was mostly intended for Republican legislators who wanted to preserve marriage as being between a man and a woman. But there, it was sent to everyone, and there was a room number and a meeting date and time. And so I showed up, and it was a room full of Republicans. And I just sat down and I participated just like everyone else did. And when it came around to me to talk about this caucus, because the underlying question they were starting with was, what are your reasons for wanting to form this caucus? And everyone else was giving different reasons on the sanctity of marriage and why marriage should only be between a man and a woman. Well, I spoke about how important marriage was to the foundation of who I am as well-adjusted contributor to society because of the strength of my parents' marriage. And that we should, as legislators, do everything we can to support families and keeping marriages strong. We need health care for families and children. We can improve adoption policies. Environment. I made this entire conversation about a manifesto on the values that I hold dearly that have come from a relationship to being in a family with a strong, healthy marriage. But I ended it by saying, and if this is a caucus that is intended to support all of these things, I can't wait to be a part of it. But if this caucus is only coming together to try to deny benefits to people who love each other, to deny them protections when they need it most, I'm sorry, I think that's discrimination, and I would encourage this caucus not to form, even if you aren't going to vote that way on this issue. You could hear a pin drop in that room when I was finished. And yet there was also a feeling of respect. Like she came in here and she didn't torch us or blaze us or lecture us or try to make us feel guilty about anything. She just said her piece in a way that was with a lot of integrity and being impeccable with my word, not making assumptions about them. I'm not necessarily assuming that you're going to make this caucus be about this. It could be about that. And definitely not taking it personally if they did or if they vote a different way. But like, let's not be mean-spirited about this if we can. I had a legislator in the room, Gail, come up to me on the floor later and tell me how compelling she thought the argument was. She said, I'm not changing my mind on my vote, but you gave us some food for thought. And they didn't form the caucus. I don't know if ultimately that had anything to do with if my speech had anything to do with it, but I just share it as an example of how you can show up, even in a scenario where you feel like people are going to be against you or where you don't know what the outcome is going to be, and how you still can have faith that by showing up with your best self, with an openness to connection, and I'm adding in here this strain of the importance of renewing that relationship and that active faith in each other for democracy to work again. That's how we're going to find our way out of all of this. Because as things are getting burned down right now, we can mourn some of that. I also think we should step back and look at maybe some things are changing that needed to be changed. We wouldn't have done it with the same torch. But okay, out of the ashes, a phoenix always rises. And instead of always giving voice to what we are against, how are we going to speak into being now what it is that we are for? And that's what I'm looking forward to talking with you about in the question and answer session now.
Thank you so much, Heather. That was really fabulous. I I wrote down that quote that democracy is a daily faith in one another. Like I just love that, and I feel like that probably resonated with the other nurses um, here on the call. I think nursing is all about personal connections and caring for one another, um, and a lot of what you have been talking about, I think, really plays into the strength of nurses and how we're the most trusted profession. And so thinking about being impeccable with our word and, these different pieces, I think are really important. Um, as you were talking, I was thinking about the challenges of some nurses that are in, say, districts where they feel like maybe they're all alone or um, they feel like, maybe there's only two of them that are, interested in environmental health or whatever cause. Like, what advice would you give to a nurse in that situation?
Oh gosh, I've seen incredible shifts happen from, I mean, with one, there's two. Like when you come together, two strengthens one, and then you build from there. Um, I mean, I'm definitely always a glass half full person. Um, and I don't believe in the illusion of impossibility. I think absolutely everything is possible. And it is just about being clear about what your intention is and staying dedicated to that path. And I saw it consistently, um, where, with let's go back to the marriage equality piece real quick, because that's one where it wasn't just where there was only two people, but it was an issue where we didn't have enough votes to win, and we had to find some more. And there are unique ways of finding new allies. Ultimately, the reason why we won marriage equality in Maryland is because we were putting pressure on legislators to talk to their high school and college age children and to ask them what their kids would feel if they were on the wrong side of history on this. And sometimes at our encouragement, that conversation would happen, but it happened on its own in a couple of places. We picked up the last 5 votes we needed in large measure from the conversation that legislators had with their children in understanding how to view this from a different generational perspective. So there's allies in all kinds of unconventional places. So if you feel like it's just you and one other person, that's probably not accurate. Have faith, stay clear, be consistent, and trust that you can expand that circle of influence.
Heather, thank you so much. This has been such an inspiring conversation. We are starting to have some questions in the chat. So I'll tell you the first one is from Lisa Summers, who says, "Thank you, Heather. Can you talk a bit about how you approach folks who challenge facts? For example, the impact of um, humans on climate change."
Mhm. Yes. So when I'm talking to someone who completely disagrees with me, paying very close attention to where my energy is and making sure that I am giving respect to the person I'm listening to, even when I disagree with them. And I let them speak what they believe from a place of respect, and they can feel the difference. I'm not sitting there waiting to challenge them with my point of view. I'm not looking for the next opportunity to insert my alternative facts. I'm first creating a connection that shows that I respect the person. And then from that, sometimes there can be growth. Uh, in 2022, in my congressional race, I was in the parking lot of a farm feed store. We have a poultry flock here, and I was loading up on additional chicken feed. And I had a woman come over to me, who was also loading her car, and she says, "Oh, you're Heather Mizeur, aren't you?" With a ton of excitement. And I shake her hand and I say, "Yes, so nice to have a chance to meet you. I hope I've earned your vote." And she said, "Oh, no." And she said, I support Trump." And I said, "Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that you and I can't find connection." So we started talking on issues of gun policy, and I brought her a little closer to where I was, and I wasn't where I wasn't looking to take anyone's guns away. She was happy to hear I had a gun on the farm to protect the flock. Um, but when we got to the issue of vaccines, we had a very, very different set of worldviews, and she had a bit more of a conspiratorial nature to what she was saying and thinking. But I listened, and I didn't just listen, I asked further questions. So ask illuminator questions and be really curious. Don't you want to know and understand why somebody feels the way they do? Half the time, the resistance and fighting what you think and believe is them wanting to just have some agency and sovereignty and get some respect for how they think and believe in the world. And you can ask illuminator questions and be curious about how someone else views the world without shifting your own opinion. And what can open from that, as we were talking, this woman, Brenda, ends up asking me if I would give her a hug. And then she starts crying. And she said, "I'm so emotional and I don't know why." And she eventually was like, "It's because I've never felt so respected when I have this conversation." She could feel that. And I I wasn't going to necessarily in that moment change her mind on her opinions, but it definitely opened a space for me to then talk about mine that was a bit more of an open-hearted dialogue. And sometimes I'll encourage someone, "Well, can you be as curious about my position as I was just showing you I was about yours?" Maybe we're not as far apart as we think. Maybe we're using words to define things that we all we're using different words, but ultimately we care about the same thing, don't you? Do you like having clean air to breathe? Do you want your water to be clean? Do we agree on that? Like working it towards where's our place of agreement instead of it being about the semantics and what it's called, to just like really look for that connection. Because when the connection happens is when the heart opens, and that's where you're going to shift something is in somebody's heart, not in their mind.
Thank you so much, Heather. Was that resonated with me a lot. We do have another question from Veronica Pena Vargas. Thank you for your inspiration. Have you looked at Father James Martin work in helping the LGBTQ Catholics? He's very welcoming.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I encourage all of you to go to our website, and maybe Millie, you can put the weareonealliance.org website in the chat. On there, you'll find our podcast. I did 3 seasons of the Soul Force podcast, Soul Force Politics podcast when I launched the organization. And one of our episodes is with Father Jim Martin. We have an amazing dialogue soon after he came back from having an audience with Pope Francis on this issue. And it's a really great conversation. And I'm happy to say that in 2026, we're going to be rolling out a new live conversational series that we're calling One Fire, Many Flames, Conversations with Luminaries. And we have Father Jim Martin as one of our guests, Congressman Jamie Raskin, Congresswoman Sarah McBride, Melissa Etheridge, Sister Helen Prejean, a whole host of folks. That will start in January. And while we're waiting for the next question to come up, the other thing I'm going to put in the chat room is a link to, I'm putting together a special offer for anyone who's on this webinar. If you want to join our online membership community at the We Are One Alliance and get access to the first course that we're releasing in January called Reimagining Resistance. There's going to be 3 different courses, and I encourage you to take them all. I'm doing a little bundled offer for everyone on this call today to get it at a deep discount, and all the contributions support the nonprofit organization. But if you're interested in pursuing this work and joining the community to have a greater dialogue, you can go there, and you'll have access to those conversation series that we'll have with Father Jim Martin and other luminaries throughout 2026.
Thank you, Heather. And as the questions keep streaming in, we have one question. We know that many nurses are feeling overwhelmed. Do you have any recommendations or actionable steps nurses can do in their everyday practice right now to incorporate the principles you covered today? And so I'm thinking that looks like their clinical practice or practice setting.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think is related to one more time. Can you, I think I understood the question, but I just want to make sure I'm not
I
going in a different direction.
Sure. I think I'll give a little context to that. Nurses, as very often the first point of contact with patients, we are exposed to their concerns and we have our own concerns, and there's a meeting of that. And so we are many of us at point of care are dealing with what is happening in the greater societal aspect of overwhelm, and that can look like politically, um, what's going to happen with our health care, um, what's happening with the environment. If you have specific symptoms as a patient and your symptoms are maybe being exacerbated in your area that lies next to a high air pollution or something like that. But now we're faced with the politics of healthcare and a government shutdown. So in the here and now, at that point of care, as the nurse is trying to connect with the patient in that holistic way that we've been trained to, how can we best help them and deal with our own sense of overwhelm and of the unknown?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Yeah, well, I'm no expert and I'm not a nurse. Um, but I will say that one really tried and true thing that I go through a lot, and it sounds so simple, it sounds ridiculous, but I go back to the breath. So you'll appreciate the math, the science behind the Heart Math Institute and the work that they've done on coherence and how to get heart coherence so that you're pumping DHEA through your body, the happy hormone, instead of cortisol. And that can be achieved whether you want to do it just for yourself or even invite your patients to do it with you. It can be achieved so quickly through a breathing technique where you invite someone to start breathing, bringing attention to the breath through the heart or chest area, a little slower and deeper than usual, but at a rhythm that is comfortable for you. And then after you've allowed that to happen for a while, you say that you invite a connection to a regenerative feeling, such as care, joy, or appreciation for someone or something in your life, and continue that heart focused breathing while connecting to that regenerative feeling. And that process can really drop you into the moment, can drop you into that heart space that has a little bit of separation from the cortisol that comes from stress and anxiety. And in that space is where clarity can arise. And you can do it for as little or as long as you need to. You can invite closing eyes or not. If it's just you on the fly and you need to do it before you interact with a coworker, you can do it with your eyes open, even right there while you're standing there talking to them. Um, but if it's something that you feel, nurses, you will have this magic power. I'm not sure you know you have. Maybe you do. When you're sitting in that point of care place with the patient, we'll do anything you ask us to do. We're leaning into you for help and advice. And if you teach us how to breathe from a place, and I'm not being ridiculous and suggesting that, oh, if we just breathe, everything's going to be okay. But through that breath and through the opportunity to lower the cortisol, um, and connect more deeply to that polyvagus nerve function, you are they'll be they'll have stronger agency, as will you, in dealing with and addressing whatever is the thing that it is that's right in front of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. We do have another question in the chat from Susan Swider. Have you had any interactions with Braver Angels? The organization strives to encourage and facilitate civil discussion. This is a challenge for me, Susan, at this point, at this time, because of the criticality of the issues and values that we are discussing. But I value your examples and calm courage.
Yeah. Thank you, Susan. What's it? Um, Yeah, it can be tough. When you want to wring someone's neck and you want to blame them for lighting the country on fire and causing all these problems that you're seeing on the front lines in that point of care, it's hard to have compassion, and it's difficult um, to want to have a dialogue. No, I just want to win. I want to have a better candidate, and I want to have more money on our side, and I want to regain control and power and just squash it. It doesn't go anywhere. The whole reason why it's there right now is it's always been there, but it was super hidden. And then it got permission to come forward. But you know this as symptoms of a disease. When the symptoms start coming forward, that's when you can get rid of the disease. If it just stays and festers, that's when there's a metastasizing that happens. So is there an opportunity to embrace what is happening right now as looking at the body politic in terms of the body, and say, okay, we have a lot of stuff coming to the surface, a lot of stuff presenting itself. It's requiring a lot of care, a lot of attention, a lot of deftness, but we can heal it. And for those of us who are skilled enough to hold the space for that healing, it's really, really necessary. And I'm going to bring this back to climate, um, because um, there's a there's a sense in quantum physics that when consciousness reaches a certain threshold, things can just shift. So I've been holding this question, and it's just a question. While it's important for us to be advocating all the things we're advocating related to policies, related to how to address the climate crisis, how much of this could be addressed by shifting consciousness? You get, if you look at a herd of deer, at when there's like a prey animal coming, there'll be one, there'll be two, there'll be three in the herd that start to put their heads up. And at a certain point, there is a consciousness shift where a message gets sent to everyone else in the herd: run. And not everyone lifted up their head to see that there was the predator. there was a shift in the collective consciousness that said, this is how we're moving now. Can that same shift happen in the status of the planet if more and more of us are able to grow a consciousness and an understanding that we are all a lot more powerful through how we show up in the world and how we connect to each other and how we think about things than what we normally give credit to. And so, yeah, I'm as guilty as anyone else of, having a momentary desire to punch someone in the face. And that's where these tools and skills come back into an important place of reminder, like, well, what does that solve? What does that get? I've seen so much more movement. And I'm going to share this story with you. So I had a veteran in the 2022 race who was mad as hell when we sent out a flyer talking about the congressman I was running against had a bad voting record on veterans issues, and this veteran didn't believe it. And he called me every name in the book, from libtard to worse. And we have a right to burn DC down because you guys just make shit up and the whole thing. And I started with thanking him for his service and talking about my father being a Vietnam veteran and my grandfather getting a Purple Heart in World War II. So we started a connection um, about military service. And then I talked about my other grandfather not serving, but was a father of 12 and a farmer. And it turns out this guy grew up on a farm too. So we were sharing our stories about being rural kids growing up on farms. Before you know it, this conversation transitioned into him sharing with me his pumpkin bread recipes and apologizing for being such an ass at the beginning of the conversation. And then I said to him, I don't do guilt and shame, so I appreciate your apology because accountability is important, but I hope you let it go. Like, politics has all been so much about dividing us, but this is what I'm trying to change. I'm trying to change and shift how we interact with each other. And he became a supporter. Um, he voted for me in 2022 and also voted he was a Trump supporter as well. And I will tell you, even though this was never my intention, 3 years later now, after staying in friendship with him, after continuing to do some Soul Force politics work with me, engaging in some of our programming on his own, he started to see the world differently. And he now is a registered Democrat. He talks publicly against Donald Trump with other veterans. I'm not encouraging that because I don't really, that's not the point for me. But I'm just giving you heart at the whole, I just think this whole trying to talk to somebody I disagree with is not worth it. Maybe it is.
Thank you so much, Heather. Um, that human connection first makes everything else possible, and everything is possible with that faith. Judy Cash says, amazing story. You're so right. Nothing is impossible with faith. Deborah Latt, thank you so much for sharing this wonderful, motivating, and inspiring. We are down to our last 4 minutes. I will put the resources that Heather has so graciously mentioned again in the chat, re-up it. But if anyone has any last questions or comments, now is your opportunity. And I want to thank each and every single one of you who took time out of your day to join us today. I think this was well received, and well needed by all of us. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I noticed one maybe last question was how to regulate your nervous system in the face of people who disagree with you. And so, in addition to the breathing technique And this is going to be a very easy audience for this because you're also environmentalists. Spend time in nature. Um, the lessons I learned by grounding myself in nature and connecting with the land and with the trees and like whatever your thing is, water, that is what I lean back into in my toughest moments. Um, and I go back to those four agreements. So read that book, dust it off and reread it if you haven't. I read it 15 years ago and I recently reread it. That's why it was on my mind for today's dialogue. It's always important to remind ourselves how to stay back and practice with the things we thought were good ideas. But also, when you read something years later, it strikes you in new ways because you're a different person. And this is another a really helpful thing to remember when you're interacting with someone. Give everybody in your life, everybody, your children, your spouses, your strangers, give everyone the grace to meet them for the first time every time you meet them. We're always different. We're always changing. We're always new in different and exciting ways. And we don't recognize that enough. We think, that this person's this way and that's how they're always going to be. Hopefully, not one of us is the same tomorrow as we were today. As conscious beings, we're constantly striving. That's what evolution is. We're constantly striving to take in information and grow and shift with it. That's where playing with all of this is really important. Like it doesn't have all of this doesn't have to be so serious. I play with this. I get really super curious when someone disagrees with me. And I'm not laughing inside at them, like making fun of them. I'm laughing inside like, wow, what a really interesting way to view the world and just take it in. Because so often in the third course I'm releasing, and I know we're wrapping up here, but the third course that I'll release, which will be a live course, so there'll be two online courses, and then a third one will be a live course. That's going to be on the sacred tension that exists within paradox. We're in a world that wants to force us into the either or, and I've consistently found the most delicious answers standing inside that paradox and being with the both and. And that often standing in that sacred tension is where limiting beliefs arise and where you can look at them and understand differently what's forcing you into that binary and how can you have a bit of a wider viewpoint that allows for transformation and shift of yourself and of others. And I hope you'll consider joining the work of the We Are One Alliance. I'm excited that Katie Huffling was recently voted in as a board member and an officer in our organization. So we have a multiple layers of an alliance here. And hopefully we'll continue to do some collaborations and joint initiatives together. And thank you so much for all the work each and every one of you are doing. I know it's so hard. I know that you don't feel valued sometimes, and it's super complicated to particularly hold up the ends of like where the intersection of health and environment meets, and you're making such a difference, like a huge, huge, huge difference on every level. And I'm looking forward to continuing to be a collaborator and a co-conspirator with you in every way I know how.
Thank you so much, Heather.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
again, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.